what is behind this building that the Nazis treasured so much. I would hope them to win the Second World War. Let's go find out. We're in a place called D'éperlecques near Saint-Omer, the Watten area. What we have behind me when we go through these doors here is a massive V2 rocket launching facilities, or where they developed, or I should say where they put together the V2 in order to bomb England. Built in between 1943 to 44. It was never really commissioned as such because the Allies bombed it to bits in a operation called Operation Crossbow. Anyway, let's go and have a look behind here. A lot of the facilities that the Nazis had regarding V1 and V2 rocket production had to be very close to the English coast. I think it was in about 200 miles because that's the range that they had. So there is a lot of bunkers and V2 and V1 rocket launching facilities around this area because we're so close to England. Calais is only a few miles down the road, and that's one of the reasons why they built them so close to England. But the trouble is because they were so close to England, they could easily be bombed. And in 1944, the Allies decided that they'd bomb these V1 and V2 rocket launching sites, including the Mimoyek one at V3, which they didn't know at the time it was a gun site, and they did it under the auspice of Operation Crossbow. So anything that had looked like V1 or V2 rocket launching facilities, they were bombed. Now the D'éperlecques site is about 7 to 8 miles, or between 10 and 12 kilometres away from La Coupole. I'm not sure if this one was built first before La Coupole. I'm not quite sure, but I will find some more information about it. This blockhouse is intended on being built to accommodate the assembly and obviously make the liquid oxygen that was necessary for the V2 to take off. It had the capacity to hold up to 100 V2s and also the capacity to allow 36 V2 rockets to be launched at England per day. These carriages were used to deport slave labour and different people to Jews to concentration camps and to areas like D'éperlecques and La Coupole and the other places, Mimoyek, for forced labour. And this is what they use. They reckon they could fit up to something like 40 people in them, probably more, knowing the Germans. They were locked shut. Apparently they had barbed wire on certain parts so they couldn't escape, and they had straw on the floor to make it a bit more comfortable. But this is the type of carriage, actually I think it's the original carriages that was used to bring slave labour to D'éperlecques, where we are now. What you see here is metal and concrete, what they call tetrahedrons. These are called checkhead jugs. They're all beach defences, and all these would have been put in front of the Atlantic wall, besides barbed wire, mines, Rommel's asparagus. And the idea was just basically stop the tanks from coming up the beaches. And anywhere it was important, they would have these down there as well. Whether it means like installations and stuff like that. For instance, in front of places probably like D'éperlecques. These 3 bombs are actually test bombs from 3 different armies. The British ones were actually made of wood, and the French ones were made of plaster, where the German ones were made of concrete. We're just coming up to D'éperlecques Blockhaus. Now this was constructed in an unusual way. What they did was they first formed the roof of it, 5 metre thick roof, and then what they did then was they started to jack it up underneath with massive jacks and put gigantic blocks of concrete 3.5 metres thick, which is 3, 6, 9, 10, just over 10, 12 foot thick, 5, 15, 16 foot thick roof. And they carried on doing that until they got to a height of 22 metres, and it's what they call the tortoise technique. In total, the concrete here was sort of 200,000 tonnes of cubic metres of concrete with 20,000 tonnes of rebar into it as well. I'll show you the size of the thing. It's absolutely gigantic. However, due to Operation Crossbow, which was the bombing of V1 and V2 rocket launching facilities, only 35% of this site was actually built or completed. This particular site was actually bombed over 25 times. Well, this is part of the facilities. This is the blockhouse behind there. You can see the size of it. It's absolutely massive. No matter how many times the RAF had bombed this, as such, same as the U-boat pens and other structures on the Atlantic wall and this type of bunker, especially a 5 metre thick roof, they were unsuccessful until Barnes Wallis, the inventor of the bouncing bomb, 617 Squadron, invented a thing called the Tallboy and the earthquake bomb. Tallboy was something like £12,000 or 5,000 kilo in weight, and it had the ability to actually penetrate stuff, structures like this. There's a hole somewhere in here, hopefully you can have a look inside in a minute, where one of the bombs actually hit it, buried itself inside and exploded. And there's also, if you can see there, there's a big hole there where another bomb has hit it and gone through, but that roof is something like probably a metre thick, so that would have been easy for the Tallboy bomb to get through that. Now just underneath here, it looks as though, reading the description as well, we can see them on the wall there. This is where they used to store the V2s. Now, obviously, beyond the side because they're quite high. I think there's something like 10 metres in height.
A real human actor.
It's like one of the Tallboy bombs has hit that and basically detached that piece of concrete there from that piece of concrete there. This back section, what you're looking at now, when the Allies captured this area, the Germans intended on building this back section here as high as the front section there, which is 22 metres in height. Out of the facilities, what Hitler tried to do regarding V2 rocket launching, this site here of D'éperlecques and La Coupole never fired one V2 in anger. That looks like a crack caused by a massive Tallboy bomb hitting this area. Tallboy bombs were that powerful, they didn't actually have to hit structures like this. They were designed to travel when they've been released from an airplane over 20,000 foot in the air. travel at something like 750 miles an hour. They had a very strong steel point on the tip of them, so when they penetrated themselves into these type of buildings, they'd go off maybe a couple of seconds later. And if it missed, it didn't make a difference. They buried themselves in the floor and created like a seismic shock. In other words, that's what they used to call the bigger ones, the 22,000-pound Tallboy bombs. They used to call them earthquake bombs. And the idea was to try and disrupt the foundations of the buildings that they were trying to destroy. Right, this is to the left-hand side of the actual blockhouse. This was initially a railway line in here, and it ran goods in and out to supply these V-2 rockets for assembly. Let's have a walk in and see what's in it. Now straight away you can feel it's quite cold actually inside here. Most caves are like that anyway. There's a picture of a what would have been a V2 on its stood up. The height of it would have been 14 metres. Its diameter is just short of 2 metres, about 1.65. Its weight's 12.5 tonne. And the speed it could hit, it's Mach 4, which is 3,500 kilometres an hour, which is pretty quick. Its range was 270 miles or 350 kilometres. It had a cruising speed of 4 times the speed of sound, which is something like 800 miles an hour. That's the case, about 5,000 kilometres an hour roughly. It could reach an height of 85 kilometres in the air, which is over 100 miles. And they say when it hits the floor, it hits it with something like over 1,000 tonnes of thrust. Its fuel is alcohol and liquid mix, both fed into a combustion chamber by a turbo pump powered by hydrogen peroxide reacting on permanganate. This gap here and outside there was a railway line which ran and brought goods in and out of the building itself. Now apparently outside there, I think it was covered with concrete. It was a protected railway line, so there was less chance of the Allies bombing it. There's no evidence of it there now, unless they hadn't finished it, I'm not sure. There's one of the bomb blast doors that they could close across this gap if the Allies were bombing this place, and there's no bits of fragments that could actually come inside and kill anybody or damage any of the V2s. That water there, that big bomb blast door there, the other side is on the right-hand side of the actual bunker itself. And there you have a Tallboy bomb. Weight 5.4 tonnes, length 6.3 metres, dropped by Avro Lancaster bombers that was adapted to take this type of bomb. On the top of it, if you can see there, I think the ailerons, they're designed a certain way for make it spin. And when it was spinning, it would spin and drop at a rate of Mach 2, or about 750 miles per hour. It could bury itself deep into soil. It had a time of delay on it, and obviously its nose must have been actually reinforced, otherwise if it hit something and it was soft, it would just break up on impact. But in this case, it didn't, and that's a Tallboy bomb. See the roof up there? It's got metal. It's a metal thing. That's to basically catch anything. When the bombs hit the top of the roof, it's trying to catch any bits that fall off. It's in most bunkers actually, especially the U-boat pens. These V2s would actually go across a production line, stood upright. They would fill them up with the fuel that was necessary, and then before they went onto the launch pad, they would put the actual head on it, you know, the explosive on it, set it for whatever they need to set it for, and then they'd take it out they would take it out and then they would put it onto the launch pad and basically launch it. Right, this is the front of the actual building itself. There should have been doors there somewhere. I'm not sure what's happened, to be honest with you. On the diagrams, there's doors there, and there's a door over there. They'd have come along this way, on a big concrete ramp, out, so many metres out, away from the actual bunker itself. And then, just up where that bird is, see it there, it's all blown away now, this part here. That's where the watchtower was, the fire control tower. They'd have made sure everything was just right before they pressed the old button. And then, obviously, when they pressed the button, they'd send it into the stratosphere, and it would go out towards England. If you have a look at the wall, you see the squares there. Well, the roof was actually built separately. It was built in one big slab of about 5 metres thick, and then they had massive jacks underneath, and they jacked the roof up, and they put these gigantic blocks here. You can see the squares there. In place, about 2 metres, 2.5 metres thick, until they got to a height of roughly about 22 metres. And they did that because they wanted to make sure that the workers underneath, while they were working on this plant, weren't killed by Allied bombing. You can see the fire control tower there has been blown completely off. The amount of bombing that the Allies carried out in Operation Crossbow around the Pas-de-Calais area, and anywhere that had a V2 or V1 rocket launching site and facilities, just didn't make it feasible for the Germans to carry on building this. And also, because it was so easily targeted, there's no way these big structures here could fire any V2s anyway. So what they did was they started to use mobile units, and they'd have a mobile unit. They'd carry a V2 on its side, and the other trucks would follow with all the fuel that's necessary, and they would erect it usually anywhere they wanted, really. A lot of them were around the Hague area in Holland, and they would erect it, fill the V2 up, arm it with its bomb on top of it, and they were set it on a course to England. That was less detectable. It was very difficult to detect, actually, if you think about it, because it's so mobile. With these big, massive structures, it's easy to spot these things, and that's why they can be bombed so easily. The V1 sites were much less conspicuous. A lot of them were in woods anyway, and it was less. It was difficult to actually spot them out because of being so small. So the V1s were less vulnerable to attack than the V2s, because the V2s have massive sites like this. Out of all the fascination with all these concrete structures and these V1 and V2 and V3 construction, it is interesting to people like me, but I don't forget the sacrifices that these poor slaves made in regarding building stuff like this for the Nazi war effort. They were forced into it. They weren't allowed to not choose, including some of the actual local French workers. They reckon if they refused to work on these projects, they were deported. But all the sacrifices these poor people, these slaves made, we must never forget. So these, in one way, are monuments to them slaves and all these people who suffered at the hands of the Nazis, regarding the memories, and we must never forget that. Well, I hope you like my little video on D'éperlecques V2 rocket launching facilities and assembly. I hope you enjoyed a little bit of history about it, and hopefully I'm going to see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. See you again.